Based on all the mentorships that you've done, especially recently, what have you seen across the board in terms of patterns of hiring, in terms of how well people are positioning themselves in this very tough environment?
The market is definitely quite a bit noisier. So I work with a lot of my mentees. So I tell them that, okay, you have certain goals that you need to hit. First goal I always have them hit is like 100 connection requests a week. Hit that. If you're not getting at least like 4 to 6 responses, then that means there's something wrong in your LinkedIn profile and we need to work on that a bit more. There are a few other ones that we try to hit with. We aim for at least 20 referred applications a week. And the other thing you can also keep in mind is that if one person is willing to refer you at a company, he's okay referring you to up to 3 roles. That's typically the standard.
I love these metrics.
How do you get those metrics, Karun? I worked at LinkedIn before at the exact team, and I don't remember any of that.
Still trying to see what hacks would work. Right now, it looks like leaning into AI might be the best bet in the sense that...
In today's episode, we're joined by Karun Thankachan, a senior data scientist at Walmart and former Amazon applied scientist, who's not only an expert in machine learning and recommender systems, but also a mentor helping thousands of people land data jobs in tech. We're diving into the science of job searching, the most effective strategy in today's job market, how AI is changing hiring for both recruiters and candidates, and why networking is the most underrated skill in data. Plus, we'll explore recommender systems and how AI is revolutionizing them. So whether you're an aspiring data scientist or mid-career professional looking for new opportunities, this episode is packed with real, actionable insights you can use right now. If you enjoy this content, subscribe to Data Neighbor in your favorite podcast app and YouTube. Let's dive into our conversation with Karun Thankachan.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Data Neighbor podcast with Sravya and Sean. Today we have Karun Thankachan with us from Walmart and previously at Amazon. Karun, welcome to the show.
Thanks all. Thanks for having me.
Welcome, Karun. Welcome. So for everyone, Karun is also a LinkedIn creator, data science creator. I think when I started creating last June, July, I got introduced to Karun through all his amazing posts on recommendation systems. And he also does great posts on just regular how to get into data science and all things like that. So I've been fan of your posts, Karun. A great job with, making sure that you also provide what you know to the world out. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I'm sort of like a lot of people helped me land sort of my first role, got me my first opportunity like within Amazon in terms of projects. And then later on, with regards to like my current role at Walmart. Happy to sort of give back.
That's awesome. So we're going to definitely go into the mentorship part because as I'm told, you mentor a whole lot of different people in helping them get into the field of themselves. So before we get there, Karun, what do you do in your day job?
Cool. So currently I'm a senior data scientist at Walmart. I'm part of a team that helps essentially improve item availability and selection within Walmart. So primarily that means building a lot of forecasting, prediction models, and a bit of work around personalization. On a high level, that would be my sort of like responsibility. Day to day, mostly, like as you would expect from a data science role, it's a lot of figuring out what would be the right data to use, cleaning that data. A small portion, around 20%, would be the modeling portion and productionizing those models and figuring out how to improve that. But yeah, the key value definitely comes from getting the right data, talking to the right people, and getting that to sort of like a usable state.
Awesome, Karun. So you were at Amazon before Walmart, right? So in Walmart, you're handling problems that are related to retail problems, I'd assume, like, stock and all of that. What were the type of problems you dealt with as an Amazon data scientist?
So at Amazon, I was part of 2 teams. Initially was part of a fintech team. So there it was primarily, as you would expect in fintech, the 2 most common problems. One is like, I would call it anomaly detection. The second is like forecasting. So those were the main things. Forecasting is primarily used in a lot of financial planning. So it wasn't essentially what we call a production quality system. The forecasts were then used for decision making. So a lot of like batch jobs. Anomaly detection was a bit more of a real-time system. So they're a bit more heavier on the engineering side. So that team primarily was a bit focused more on solving business problems. The next team that I worked on was a bit more in the HR space. So essentially improving employee outcomes. So making sure that people have like good experiences or good careers within Amazon. So for that, it's not as well defined of a problem, or the decisions aren't as simple as it would be in other spaces. So it was a lot more research heavy. The models that we built tend to be fairly novel, usually led to quite a few papers. And it was definitely a bit more research heavy role, which allowed me to switch from within Amazon. There are two types of roles. One is data science, the other is applied science. Data science is a bit more focused on solving business problems. The model that you use typically doesn't matter. In applied science, typically the problems tend to be a bit more vague. You need to understand the research and the business problem in depth a lot more. So typically the models that you tend to produce tend to be very novel and specific. So that's why they usually hire applied scientists. So the second team was a bit more research heavy.
Got it. That's really cool. That's I do want to get into, if we have time, on the employee outcome piece. I've never heard of like people work specifically in that space.
Mhm.
So, like maybe that'll be interesting for our audience as well.
Sure.
Before we get there, I think you also mentor a ton of people, right? Helping them get into the field. Based on all the mentorships that you've done, especially recently, what have you seen across the board in terms of patterns of hiring, in terms of how well people are positioning themselves in this very tough environment, frankly speaking, probably tougher than a year ago, tougher definitely than another year ago. So what's been your general observation?
The market is definitely quite a bit more noisier. Primarily because everybody's using AI, in the sense that people who are hiring are using AI to sort of skim through resumes. That's always been the case. Like ATS has that keyword search that's still in place, and a lot more solutions are being placed or coming out in the market where essentially as a recruiter, you don't need to spend a lot of time going through resumes. They'll sort of pick out ones that match your criteria a bit better for you. And at the same time, candidates are also using a lot more AI to tailor their resumes and cover letters, and
Hopefully
there
not
even
in interviews.
and and even like there are companies that I think for like $1 they will do 4 applications for you. So it's pretty cheap to scale. So you can imagine like maybe like 3-4 years before, a person might have been able to apply to maybe 100 jobs. Nowadays a person is able to apply to like close to 1,000 jobs.
What?
The number of
That's crazy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of people who, I mean, especially if you are maybe like an international student, you have like a certain time window. So they would be willing to spend money to automate that application process and increase their chances. So because of that, the number of applications are significantly more. A human isn't reviewing those applications necessarily. So the market gets a bit more noisier. Yeah. The main things that sort of help you navigate the market, I feel 1 or 50% is basically your portfolio and your resume. For different kind of roles, there are different things that hiring managers look for. I guess the role that I can best speak to would be what's called like the data science or applied data science role. Essentially, your day-to-day looks like you need to build models and productionize those models. Maybe 50% of data science is what we call applied data science, and the other 50% is what we call product data science. Typically, you may not necessarily build models that exist in production, but you do a lot of statistics, experimentation, and data analysis and help business make decisions. So you may not have a model that gets launched into production, but you'll develop either statistical models or just do basic analysis or A/B testing, whatever, to help business make go, no-go decisions. So that's product data science. The skills required are a bit different. But for applied data science, typically there are like 3 main skill sets that hiring manager looks for. One is like your ability to do data analysis and feature engineering, your ability to fit and tune models, and a third is your ability to productionize models. So those 3, if you have good projects that sort of showcase your ability to do those 3 things, typically I would say that's a good portfolio. And then it's just about writing whatever you did in a very concise but clear manner in your resume. So once you have that, 50% of your work is done. The next 50% is sort of the harder or more ambiguous part, which is getting somebody to refer you and hopefully giving them enough confidence that they can actually reach out to the hiring manager and say that, hey, this person is a good candidate. Maybe you should give him a shot. So that's a bit more ambiguous. Yeah, there are a lot of strategies. Like the one that I always recommend is just LinkedIn connection request, the basic premium version. The lowest tier of the premium version gives you like 100 connection requests a week. So use that and try and convert that as much as possible. The conversion rate is pretty poor in the sense that right now it's maybe between 4 to 6%. So for like 100 connection requests you send out, only 4 to 6 people
I
respond.
love these metrics.
How you get those metrics, Karun? I
So
worked at
I
LinkedIn
work-
before at the exact team, and I don't remember any of that.
So I work with a lot of like my mentees. So I tell them that, okay, you have certain goals that you need to hit, which is like 100 connection requests a week. You have to use that because there is no way to get more connection. I mean, you can't send any more connection messages than that. Like if you lose out on 1 week, the next week, it's not like whatever you left on the table the previous week you can carry
It's
over.
not, you won't get
doesn't
200.
exist.
You
You won't
basically
get
200 next week.
So
Yes.
the first goal I always have them hit is like 100 connection requests a week. Hit that. If you're not getting at least like 4 to 6 responses, then that means there's something wrong in your LinkedIn profile and we need to sort of like work on that a bit more. Like if you have decent projects, you should be at least 4 people out of those 100 should be responding to you. And there are like a few other ones that we try to hit, which is like we try to aim for like at least 20 referred applications a week. So at least 20 applications you need to put in with referral, which is harder than it sounds because getting referrals takes a
it's
while.
pretty hard, right? Like how,
Yeah,
I mean, you're talking about 4 new connections and 20 referred job applications, which means
Yep.
you're supposed to already have a great user base or network that could help
Exactly.
you get the extra 16 if assume the 4 people have
Exactly.
agreed to
So
refer you.
which is why there is that cold period. Like if you have like a very normal, or if you're starting out absolutely new in LinkedIn, you won't have like that set of people who can refer you. Maybe you'll have a few people, especially like at fan companies, almost everybody knows somebody who might refer. But you need more. So for the first 3 weeks, probably you won't be able to do that 20 referred applications. So just focus on the connection requests. Slowly things will start trickling in. And the other thing you can also remember or keep in mind is that if one person is willing to refer you at a company, he's okay referring you to up to 3 roles. That's typically the standard. Like I think it's sort of set by Google because they have this thing like once somebody refers you, you can apply to up to 3 roles. So yeah, typically people are okay referring you for up to 3 roles. So
Another metric drop right here. So we had 3 metrics so far. I just want to like pause and get people up to speed, right? So the first metric is make sure you get 100 connection requests per week. And the second one is to make sure you at least get 4 to 5 connections accepted. That's like, the minimum, guys. You have to get more than that. And the third one is up to 20 referrals per week. Referral applications per week. Oh, this is the fourth one that you just dropped, which is you make sure from that one person that you get a referral from, they could only do up to 3 jobs. Okay.
Yep, they might be
Karun,
willing to do more,
I've never
but
heard
yeah.
people put it in such a structure before. This
This is awesome.
It's great. And honestly, like I'm guessing like most of your mentees are new professionals, right?
Yep.
Got
Most of them are grad students, yeah.
Got it. And I mean, like this same sort of goalpost also applies to people who are currently looking for a new opportunity as well.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like if they understand the fact that, hey, you're only supposed to get like 4 responses out of those 100, it sort of sets their mentality a bit more correct, because usually they send like 20, 30 connection requests on a weekend, and by Monday they don't hear back and they're like, oh, suddenly very disheartened. And I keep telling them it's okay. You can, first of all, when you send a connection request, probably people will take like 2 weeks to respond. So wait, take some time. And out of the 100, 96 won't respond. This is a given. We know this. It changes a bit if you have like maybe like a well-known college name. It does influence, like even though some people say it doesn't change much. Or if you have like a previous fangish company on your resume, I mean like on your LinkedIn, again, obviously it helps. So yeah, there are a few things that might help, but
So Karun,
you're going to be rejection filled.
at this point, you could build a model on this. Attributes, the college name, the bachelor's or master's, the type of education, and how many connections you already have, right? And the type of message, the keywords in the message, like what not. And then Karun's model is going to point out, guys, how many request accepts you're going to get. And don't be disheartened if you get, less than that, because it's going to come, sort of a thing. Now, I definitely agree. Understanding what is the benchmark is so darn important. Not for big companies, we need benchmarks, right? We think we are doing so low with the conversion rate or with the CTR of like 2%. And like, hey guys, the benchmark is 1.3% for a marketing email. So, or like 0.1%. So we are doing extremely
Exactly.
well, That's what benchmarks does to you. And especially in these tough times when people, especially newcomers who do not know the industry, who do not have any understanding and are on tight deadlines, your positive mindset shift is so important for you to stick through and have that perseverance in making sure you continue the search and not get disheartened and drop or do something. And benchmarks like this, whatever you talked about, is going to be extremely helpful.
Definitely. It just, if you understand that it's gonna be a huge majority, not even majority, like close to 95%, it's gonna be rejections. It's sort of set. Once you understand that, the process becomes a bit more easier, I would say. Like mentally, it becomes a bit more easier.
So it becomes a numbers game. You turn it into into basically a funnel, and then your expected value is 1.
Exactly. Yeah, it's exactly a funnel. Yeah, a very narrow funnel. Yeah.
So in the noisier world of AI, what has changed in that process? Did you just have to lower your conversion rate, up your top of funnel, reach outs and things? Is that what you see?
Yeah. Definitely. I had so when I started this, I looked at my numbers, which I had in 2019 and 2020. 2019 and 2020 again was like a blip in the sense that because of there was a lot of pandemic market fit products, and especially fan companies were hiring like crazy because everybody went online. So I consider that a blip, but during that time, the response rates for callbacks were closer to double digits, like 10%. So it's been like half now. So that's like a serious concern. And even like referred applications, the last time I checked, my mentees are getting between like close to 2 to 3% callback rate for referred applications, which is horrendous. It used to be higher, definitely. For referred applications, it used to be typically like close to 5. Last time I checked, it's closer to 2 now, which is kind of hard. Because again, another thing is emerging, which is basically there are these groups which will refer for you. So that's sort of dropping the quality of a referral nowadays also. So a lot of hacks people are coming out with, which makes the process a bit more noisy nowadays.
Do you actively think about new let's call it like techniques or hacks for people as you see these stats? I'm guessing it sounds like you tally these statistics.
Been trying to sort of just because you need to play a higher numbers game, I've been trying to see how cold messaging has been working out. So there are like a couple of plugins like Apollo and Hunter, which estimates what the email of the person is going to be based on their LinkedIn name and which company they're working at. Our names are basically if you know the person's full name, you can sort of get at what especially if they're at Microsoft or like one of the fan companies or like most companies, you can get at what their email is going to be. So
like Karun.tankachan at walmart.com, Karun.tankachan at amazon.com, right?
Exactly. Or it's going to be like first 3 letters of your first name. Once you know that formula, you can sort of get at
like 10 combinations and you're good to go. Just send 10 emails.
That's
exactly
how our email addresses work exposed, I guess.
Yeah.
That's
Exactly. So there are plugins for that, and I've been trying to see how cold emailing has been. So there are a lot of people who say that they have like the template down, but cold email, the response rate has been around the same as like LinkedIn connection requests. So still trying to see what hacks would work. Right now, it looks like leaning into AI might be the best bet, in the sense that using AI to automate a bit of the tailoring of your cover letter, your resume, or any of the why this company sort of things, because those things sometimes do matter. Leaning into that might help. And leaning into communities could help. So I do advise my mentees on that, but most of my guides essentially cover what's worked for me, which is LinkedIn, resume, portfolio, and just connection requests again and again. Yeah.
The AI piece is interesting. So what are top 3 tips with that you said right now? It looks like it's leaning to be a winner for people?
So in terms of like writing your resume, the strategy that I tell people is like, don't try and tailor a resume for every role. Template your resume out, which basically means like, for instance, like most of my experience was in a bit around NLP, a bit around time series forecasting, and then like some startup projects like kind of like projects where I didn't put anything into production, a few sort of like personal projects here and there. So I had like one resume that was time series heavy, time series / e-commerce / finance heavy, one that was like NLP in e-commerce sort of heavy, and one that was like had like a mix of everything. So whenever I saw a role, I would just take whichever resume was the most apt one, and so within your resume, you typically have this section called skills, and within skills, you have this subsection called competencies, where you write out stuff like time series forecasting, XD boost, whatever keywords that you feel will ATS is going to search for. Just copy paste the job description into whatever AI, it's going to tell you what the main keywords are, and make sure those keywords are there within the competencies, as long as you are aware of those techniques, assuming you're aware of those techniques. Make sure it's there in this competency section. So it will help you clear the ATS bar. And as far as like most recruiters I've worked with, you don't need to score very high on the ATS. Like you just need to clear the bar. After that, it's not like the person with the highest ATS score is going to be the first one to be viewed. At least that's not been my experience. Everybody who clears the bar, they sort of do review it based on like a few other things, like experience, previous companies, projects, stuff like that. Like a person does sort of spend like very few little time, like 6 to 7 seconds, but they do go through your resume. That's been my experience as far. So just use keywords to clear that ATS bar, and don't personalize your resume for every role unless you feel like you're an extremely good match, because you need to maintain that quantity as well as quality. Because I've seen like a lot of mentees, whenever they personalize their resume, they make spelling mistakes. They use metrics that doesn't necessarily match what they're saying they did. So just take your time, make sure your resume is like, it makes sense, it's accurate, and there are no spelling mistakes, grammatical mistakes. Like spend time jotting down all the projects, and then if you want, maybe you can move one project out, one project in. But don't spend too much time personalizing that portion. Very low chance of getting a call back anyways. So why spend that much time personalizing a resume? Go for quantity while maintaining quality.
That makes sense. Oh my God.
Yeah.
You reversed engineer the whole and for the audience, ATS stands for applicant tracking system. That's when you submit an application, that there's this middle software that effectively, I guess, kind of allocates them to a pool and like does its own screening, like all that kind of stuff based on a very crude criteria.
So also, Karun, basically to summarize what you're talking about, how do we have your resumes divided into multiple, if you are a college, you just graduated out of your bachelor's or master's, and you have studied a big area of specialization where you see yourself getting into probably 3 to 4 types of roles. If I could talk about data science, you could get into, data analyst, you could get into data science product, you could get into applied science, you could get into probably quant analyst. I don't know. There could be multiple types, and all of these could also have multiple domains related to finance, related to retail, related to probably social media, like all of these, right? So now that you have these type of roles and domains, come up with a combination that is the right quantity, basically 3, 4. Do you have any metric there? I'm sure you will, Karun. Like the number of resumes, like 4 or 5 or 3 type of resumes, but make sure it's absolutely stellar in quality. As soon as someone looks at it, they think this particular person is really good for this role because of this, this, and this, and it does not have irrelevant information that you would not need. Like imagine let's say I'm hiring for a data analyst today, and all I see in the resume that this person productionized models and has done this work, then I'm like, this person is not right for me. They might be really good, but I'm sure if they come to this role, they're not going to work on productionized models, and they probably might not be happy with the role. And, shift. So stuff like that. So going back to the question, do you have any number of resumes you think a person should maintain just to make it easier for them?
So it depends a little bit on what kind of projects they're done. So typically, I would say, for somebody who's like very fresh, like out of bachelor's or has no experience and just finished their master's, typically their projects, just because nobody maybe told them before, it tends to be a little all over the place. So having a specific business domain or technical domain that you are really good at does help you land a role faster in the current market. So typically freshers, their projects tend to be a little bit all over the place. Like they have like one image recognition project, one some kind of like deep neural network project, some kind of fraud detection, some kind of time series forecasting. So they have projects all over the place. So usually for those folks, what I recommend is actually targeting a data science role in a company with like essentially a smaller company with employees like maybe less than 2000, just because the larger companies, they tend to pay data scientists a certain amount and they expect a decent return. Like data science has matured to the point that they no longer just want to hire people who know how to fit and tune models, but they want to hire people who know how to fit and tune models to the point that they can actually solve a business problem and get a return on investment. So it's sort of gotten to that point. So they want people who understand the problem nuance fairly well, or like really understand modeling fairly well. Like if you're getting hired to if you're aiming to get into an Alexa team, if you really know your NLP models, you might actually stand a chance. Or if you're going for like a fintech company, if you really know a specific domain in finance, like credit risk modeling, then you might stand a chance. But if you're like an absolute fresher, going for small companies is one route if you still want to land that data science role. Or I ask usually people to pivot completely into a data analyst role, focus on dashboarding, statistics, and SQL. Primarily because in my experience, managers are a bit more willing to take a chance on freshers in data analyst roles just because they're paid maybe slight or significantly a little lesser than data scientists. So they're okay hiring freshers into a data analyst role. So if you're an absolute fresher, if your projects describe what I'm saying, which is like all over the place, you don't have like a tech domain depth or a business domain depth, then going for smaller companies, data science or data, switching over to data analyst and then thinking about switching back into data science once you have some experience, that might be the way to go. If you have projects that demonstrate either tech depth or business depth or both, then you can think about that resume crafting. Typically, grad students have tech depth in the sense that they have like a domain that they really like and they go into that domain fairly well. Usually nowadays it's been like NLP because of the Gen AI hype. So a lot of people have a lot of like NLP related projects. So typically I ask them create one NLP heavy project, but also have one that's a bit generic where you cover a few things like a simple prediction problem at scale, a simple time series forecasting problem, because these two problems are very common. Every company, multiple teams will be dealing with this. So having like those two problems will be good. And then mix in your NLP project. So those two are pretty good. Then there are folks who have worked a bit before their like masters. So they usually have like a domain, a business domain depth as well.
Yep.
Most common ones are like typically ads or supply chain are the most common ones I've seen. So yeah, if you have like business domain depth, then you can create an additional resume where multiple techniques you might be using in that business domain, and all of that, and then showcase that business domain depth. So you would have 3 if you have that business domain depth as well. So yeah, it depends upon your projects, your experience a bit as well.
Holy cow! I've never heard of someone so good at cracking this. This is.
You made it a science. Like he made it a science, right? Hi, like Karun, you made this like a science with attributes and the exact features and when to go for what. Like I really think we can make a flowchart out of this, or like a small heuristic model just based on everything that I heard today.
We did, happy to.
Yeah, and everything that you said, you are effectively just make sure people highlight their best self, right? Like you're not fabricating anything. You're not telling them to do anything that they don't already qualify for anyway. And so, like, Sravya can probably speak to this as well. A couple of years ago, when we worked together, one of the hardest things is always to hire, believe it or not. Like, given the huge volume of applicants and candidates, it is incredibly difficult to hire. And I wish all the candidates went through kind of like what you had said.
Also, absolutely agree with what Hai said. And also another thing that I want to point out is that you mentioned how important it is to have domain knowledge, right? And especially in these times, that's what, like, I have so many friends of mine, so many people I coach like cousins and all who are trying to be in the job market today. And that combined with like a tough market, combined with AI and like too many things, the importance of domain knowledge has increased like almost multifold right now.
Yep.
So this is like a great lesson for the current applicants, or current, pool of people who are trying to get in, is to make sure you double down on the domain knowledge that you have, and make sure you portray it with the quality that you already know and things like that. And for the people who are studying today, for all your followers and some of mine and some of, the highs, when we talk about this podcast, is that this is also one way to tell people, if you are doing your master's right now, if you are, doing your bachelor's right now, what do you focus on when you come up with projects, right? Do you do like a breadth, just have projects across the breadth? Or do you do take one and go in depth? Or probably you do some part of breadth and then take one and go to the depth. Things like that. So I would say what you mentioned just covers all of this, right? While I think all the discussion so far has been more top of the funnel, which is job applications, like, making sure you know what jobs you want to apply, how do you want your resumes to be, how to use AI there. And we also kind of majorly talked about the earlier people in their career, right? People who just graduated, or people probably in their early careers to some extent. So how do you want to talk about the same thing for people with probably a mid-level data science or mid-level data folk, or people who probably are in a different type of role, maybe a senior analyst that wants to try, data scientist, basically people with some experience in the industry? How do you think the job market's for them?
So if you're transitioning over from another role, then there's a slight delta between what your current role is and what the role you're going to be aiming for is. So if you're a senior data analyst, typically you'll be really good at SQL, data modeling, visualization, communicating with stakeholders, and a decent amount of statistics and maybe A/B testing. So those would be like your strong points. If you're looking to transition into data science, product data science would be a fairly smooth transition. You might need to pick up a bit more modeling, and that you can demonstrate via personal projects. And typically senior from data analyst to product data scientist, most people are able to make that transition without having to level down. If you're looking to switch into applied data science, machine learning engineer, usually the quality of code, there's typically some kind of like code quality bar, which is like a lead code bar. So if you're looking to transition within company, you can probably skip that. The next sort of hurdle that you need to convince people is that you know how to fit and tune models at scale, essentially build like scalable, reliable models and put them in production. So the question now becomes, how do you demonstrate that either via personal projects, or can you talk to your manager and get something on the side, or shadow somebody on the side? So if you're looking to transition internally, ideally the best option, try and match what role you're aiming for as much as the role you're in. So senior data analyst to product data science is a pretty smooth transition. From product data science, maybe later on to applied data science can be smooth, assuming you have that fit and tune models at scale, some kind of work samples for that, either personal projects or within your company. So that would be the main thing for folks who are transitioning in their career. Whatever the delta is, have work samples for that. For people in their middle careers who are looking to go into the market, into the wild, basically they are sort of expected to deal with a lot more ambiguous problems. So your sort of like star stories that you have where you deal with ambiguity, you need to really nail those down, because in whatever domain you're working, hopefully, if you're in a mid-level role, you must have dealt with a problem where either the problem that the business wants to solve, the way they're thinking of solving it, isn't the way it's supposed to be solved, and you need to have a lot of conversation with them to figure out what exactly is it that they want to solve. Or the business has a vague idea of something that they want to build, and you need to crystallize that out. So that kind of like ambiguity, you must have dealt with that. And second, you need to sort of have this high level ability to design systems and how it would look like maybe over the course of like 2 to 3 months. Like really being able to plan things out in the long term is what like sets apart, or in my opinion sets apart like a really good mid to senior level data scientist. They're able to understand, or they're able to proactively see a lot of the issues that's gonna come up and allocate like a really good timelines to those like especially in terms of like data quality and what issues would come up there, collaborating with other teams and what issues would come up there. So more than the technical skills or the projects, what you need to really highlight is sort of those soft skills, I would say, like especially your ability to deal with ambiguous problems and collaborate with teams and sort of build and stick to timelines, I would say.
I mean, you absolutely nailed those. I'm sure like Hi and I, every time we hire, we've looked at these as very important things. But one thing I want to ask you, when you probably mentor people, have you seen this as a fault area generally with people? Is that where they, like, because we talked about top of the funnel, right? And bottom of the funnel, why do people fail to land a job? Has this been one of the biggest things that you've seen pop up? Is that why you spoke about it?
Yeah, the main thing, the ambiguity problem, I feel like they don't really have a good ambiguous problem handling star story. And the second one is, I feel like they may not have led the thing from start to end. Like they probably did everything, but I feel like when somebody's done or led a problem from start to end for a while, they sort of have this ability to be able to anticipate what's going to come next very well. When you talk to them, it comes across in the way that they speak that, okay, this is what I'm going to do. These are things that I'm going to check for. This is how I'm going to communicate. It sort of comes across in the way that you talk to them. And in some people, they break down the task in a too simplistic manner. That might be the best way to describe it. So it
basically
feels like
nuances, right?
Yeah,
nuances
they lack
are
the
lost.
nuances. Yeah,
They lack the nuances. So that comes from lacking some sort of an ownership of some sort, not leading the space, but being an executor, not the person that's designing the problem, right?
Exactly.
And things like that. And today's world, if you are a mid to senior career folk, then this is something that people absolutely need to get hired. So either you might have done that role, but you probably didn't realize, or you don't have this story, like, you know, in your head on how you want to showcase it. So probably people need to come up with a story on how they want to showcase the skill that they might have worked on. Number one, probably if you are working today and look into, you know, changing, making sure that you get an opportunity to do this as part of your work too. It actually improves, just get better at your work and, you know, maybe get promoted too if you probably do this in a good way.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. If you can just, and some people I feel like they do know everything, they do understand nuances, but sometimes just when they're talking, they sort of maybe to reduce the amount of time that they speak, or maybe to not make everything a bit more complicated, they skip out on those things. But yeah, those two things are the ones that I sort of see missing. They don't lean into the ambiguity portion, and they either skip over or they miss out on the, like you mentioned, the nuances.
Yeah, the way I like to highlight that is the ability to highlight complexities. And believe it or not, it's actually because if all you do is talk about what you did, it is very easy for the reader to be like, oh yeah, of course you did that. Oh yeah, of course that happened. Why is that hard? Why is that difficult?
Yeah.
Why is there anything ambiguous on that? Of course, it needs to be done that way. But highlighting complexity is actually an art. Well, I mean, we can put a science on top of it. I've actually talked to other folks, mentor, I think one or two, around that same topic. So for those who are listening or watching, if you're interested, we can make a entirely different episode on that. And just let us know.
Yeah, absolutely, right? Like basically, I remember this when we were working too. To be honest, a simple analysis or a really good deep dive into why the problem, why are we seeing a certain problem, could be done in like 1 or 2 pages, right? And if someone looks at it and they're like, hey, this is the reason why we're seeing this today, or this is what we need to do. I'm like, oh, it's this simple. Why did you guys take like an entire like 2 weeks to get into it? If you don't have the challenges section there, right? This is for people not just who are like, you know, looking for jobs and talking about why their work was complicated or the nuances. But it's also when you're presenting your work in your current job, make sure that you highlight the challenges. Make sure that you talk about what made this work take so long, or why was it hard? Why was it not a simple thing that you could grab and just show them? And so that tells folk the importance of the science that you did, along with the art that I mentioned.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's so applicable even for current day working professionals.
Yeah, definitely.
That's awesome. Cool. Speaking of domain knowledge and depth of that, I want to switch gear a little bit to recommender systems. So Karun, as we heard, you have tremendous experience doing that. Can you describe a bit about where did you apply that to, what sort of work you've done in that space, and what does it look like in the actual world when you actually have to implement recommender system?
Sure.
Also, I'd love for you to start with the last part first. What is recommender systems? How does it look like the real world? And then probably get into the details. That really be.
Recommender system 101 to start.
Yeah, I love that.
Sure. So recommendation systems, essentially, I guess when the internet came about, there was a lot of information available. And how did we actually get to what we want? We built search systems. So basically, you said what you want in a few keywords and search engines would find that for you. Eventually, we realized that, hey, we know what people interact with. So maybe we can, instead of like even before they search for something, we can recommend what they could like based on what they have interacted with and what the population in general has interacted with. It helps in this concept of discovery, which is essentially from recommendation systems, you would find things that you may not have actually thought of, like board games that you may be interested in or music that you like, but you didn't know about this band, stuff like that. So that's actually how they proved it. I think 90s move. There was a research group that proved the commercial viability by recommending music CDs. So yeah, that's...
So it reminded me of something. So it's like, basically, you don't know that you wanted it until you saw it.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And you're like, oh, I didn't know I wanted this. I didn't know I need this in my daily life. Now I know. Now that you see it, I'm like, I need this, sort of a thing.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, it can be really helpful in discovery, and because there's like a huge commercial aspect attached to it, it's powered pretty much everything. Like all the ads that you see is probably powered by some kind of like rec engine. In terms of like what it looks like in the current like corporate space, typically recommendation is sort of done in like a phased approach. So usually we have most companies will be dealing at the scale of like millions, if not billions. So usually they do it in like phased approaches because they're working at that scale. Typically there's this phase called candidate generation, which is where you deal with that.
Karun, before we dive deep into the exact specifics and technicality, I'd love to understand some examples of recommender system. You did talk about what it is. It's like this YouTube. YouTube is a recommender system, like retail, Walmart, you go to login is a recommender system, I assume. Maybe you could take one example and talk about that specific example.
I mean, if you log into Netflix, almost every carousel that you see is powered by some kind of like a recommendation rule. The most common one, the easiest one, digest, is the top 10. So what everybody is watching will be recommended to you. So top 10 movies, top 10 TV series, that's sort of a recommendation engine. It's called the popularity recommender. Whatever's popular will be recommended. Similarly, if you typically see a lot of action movies, you'll be recommended maybe an action movie like a Marvel movie. Or if you see a lot of rom-coms, you'll see those more rom-coms. So that's sort of how recommendation systems learn what you like, what your implicit preferences are, and try and make it explicit through recommendations. Same thing in Walmart, Amazon, like based on maybe your past shopping history, it might recommend a dress that you may want to buy, or a board game because maybe you're a fan of Catan, maybe another strategy-based board game like Scythe. It might recommend something like that. So it can be based on your shopping history, or it could be based on something like it's Thanksgiving, so it's gonna recommend you a turkey package meals, something like that. So there could be a lot of reasons for making recommendations, but the idea is trying to understand the implicit user desires and making it explicit through product recommendations. Yeah.
I love this, the way you said the implicit and explicit, but even in the implicit ones, I assume something that as a user, I do something explicitly, wherein I go to Netflix, I watch an entire episode and I say, I love it, right? There's a love this. So that's me telling Netflix guys, you better, this is what I like just telling them. And they have so many things now about the actors, the genre, like whatever the movie is about, and me. And that's explicitly, I'm like telling them, right? And there's something that implicitly it might observe, wherein what are they showing me and what am I clicking on, or what am I letting the trailer, I watch trailers, right? And what am I not skipping and what am I going through? This is not what I'm thinking I told Netflix, but this is what Netflix observed about me implicitly, right? I'm sure in signals, there's like something that the user went in and told who they are, like what they like. And there's something that Netflix observes about you. And there's third thing probably about like seasonality, like you said. Maybe it's Christmas and it's Christmas time. Like everything comes, or people generally feel to watch family stuff or rom-coms more, or more holiday stuff more, sort of a thing. Is this a good categorization? I mean, I personally didn't work on Rexes exactly, but I'm sure there's multiple nuances in here. Anything else you'd like to add to this?
Yeah, definitely. Like there are different kinds of signals: implicit signals, explicit signals. Like you mentioned, seasonality-based signals, social network signals. Yeah, there are a ton of signals that you can sort of draw based on like how much instrumentation you have. But yeah, definitely current research trends, I would say implicit is sort of even though it's the most noisiest, it's the most kind of most researched one. Yeah, basically the most the one that you can act on the best because you get it so frequently. Even though it's a bit noisy, you get a constant stream of implicit signals of watch duration, of clicks, of hours, of everything. So all of that is what's most researched. But yeah, you can use a ton of signals.
Yeah, it makes sense because most of us probably don't do anything to tell the algorithm that, hey, we like this, we don't like that, we just skip. If we can read minds, we don't even need them to tell us. And if you just take explicit, could be very biased just by the fact that most people choose not to do anything anyway. And so that makes sense. Okay, cool. That's awesome. That's a great setup for then what does the actual workflow look like, Karun? You were getting into that.
So yeah, it's divided into a couple of phases. The first phase we call candidate generation. In terms of like how companies work, usually there's like a very research heavy team that takes care of this candidate generation process. They do it at scale. So you're thinking like huge clusters, PySpark level code, and interestingly, kind of simpler models just because it's easier to scale and sort of get them completed in time. So usually I've seen like metrics factorization models or variants of those being employed there. And the focus more is on instrumentation and getting good quality signals that can be used to create those huge matrices of basically what we do in this matrices is you have your user along, let's say, the row, whatever item or products along the columns, and what you're trying to do from this matrix is figure out based on what you have liked across the items, based on what other users have liked across their items, what can be recommended to you using certain metrics decomposition techniques. So typically that's called the candidate generation space. Usually there's like, I wouldn't say one team, but like one department within a company that's pretty heavily invested in making sure candidate generation is as good as possible because it's what feeds everything downstream. And after that, typically there are a few teams that work on what we call ranking and scoring. Basically, ranking teams might take a bit more. So candidate generation teams typically work on, let's say, the start of the day, they get all the interactions for the till that day and use that to retrain the model. Ranking teams might work on a bit more real time. They get a lot more in-time signals and they might use that to adjust the ranked list of recommendations they make to the user. And there could be separate like scoring teams that sort of use business rules. Like maybe this content shouldn't be shown in this region, or we have like a clearance sale running on this item, so let's push it up in the recommendation. Or we get a better margin on certain things, so let's push it up in the recommendation. Stuff like that. Business rules can be used to re-rank the recommendation. So typically the candidate generation is like a whole department on its own. And the other teams are sort of embedded within business teams, because based on a lot of like the business knowledge, the scoring would change. Yeah, and that's usually how companies work. For me, how I got into Rex is I sort of happened on a project in Amazon. Till that time, I was like mostly just working on NLP sort of projects and was very lucky enough to get like a Rexis project assigned to me. It was like a fairly small problem in the sense that I was working with the HR team that I mentioned earlier. So usually when a candidate onboards onto Amazon, manager essentially assigns the onboarding content, what they have to go through, which is typically like very redundant HR training. But we also have a lot of like Confluence pages and a lot of tutorials, and Amazon has its own sort of machine learning community and stuff like that. Like there's a lot of courses that you can that could be useful to that person. Essentially, they brought everything together in like 1 DB, and they wanted somebody to, based on the person's employee profile, essentially the role, the level, stuff like that, look through all the content and create automatically an employee onboarding plan. So yeah,
That's so cool.
that
So
was
cool.
yeah. So yeah, that was like the Rexis project. It worked fairly well, like especially with discovery. There were like a lot of business rules in the sense that okay, certain content is restricted to certain levels. So yeah, it was like the typical candidate generation, and I just needed candidate generation and a scoring layer. So yeah, it was like definitely an interesting project. It's sort of where I got to work with like popularity recommenders, then a metrics factorization, then got to work with like 2 tower neural networks. So that definitely very cool. And yeah, in Walmart had the opportunity thus far to work a bit with actually, I don't know if I'm supposed to talk about that, but yeah, a
That's
bit
fine.
with like some of the stuff that's hopefully coming out. But yeah,
In Karun, yeah, the employee, I guess, onboarding material recommender system that you did, were you doing that like end to end pretty much? Since I'm guessing
yeah.
it's not like a crazy.
I mean, I had like an L6, L6 would be senior applied scientist who had like a lot of knowledge with Rexis. So he was definitely like I had to run everything by him. Like whenever okay, these were the model experiments, these were the results, and this is what I think I should do next. So he would obviously give a lot of feedback, and he definitely helped me with like the productionization of that. Because till that time, most of the models that I built were batch. I hadn't built like any proper real time models. Like I'd built like an anomaly detection model before, but I used like forecasting based models on that. So it wasn't necessarily real time because I could generate like the forecast for 7 days, and then I could just store that. And so the real time portion was just a SQL query. So it wasn't really real time necessarily.
Yeah.
This is like proper, like when the API call is made, I have to make a prediction.
So cool. I mean, like, I think in a way, I appreciate this example way more than, let's say, like, oh, I worked on Netflix's movies you may like, for example, right? Because they're gigantic. You're probably like a one small piece of in the candidate generations team, like a candidate selections team, and you don't quite see the down funnel stream of the whole process. But you are taking this, I mean, again, like first time hearing a problem like that. That's cool. That's really cool.
Yeah.
And then you're able
It
to
was
like
like a
just,
really good opportunity. Yeah.
yeah, own it end to end. That's
Probably
so
that
interesting.
helped you understand, right? The different layers of recommender system way more because of the end-to-end
Definitely.
approach.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And yeah, I had like the person who mentored me was very patient and helped me because I was like absolutely new. So I came in like with zero knowledge. So he gave me like, okay, this book, this resources. So yeah, which is again like another reason why I do mentoring, because a lot of people did help me out.
That's so cool. In the world of I guess like AI, how do you see, like, for example, like AI assistants, AI like software can help you in this workflow?
So actually LLMs has been sort of giving, I wouldn't say like breaking SOTA, but it's been pretty helpful in the sense that LLMs sort of encompass within it a certain amount of like world knowledge, and it's been shown to be helpful in making predictions, especially within like the candidate generation layer. Within the ranking layer, I haven't seen like much papers, but within the candidate generation layer, the world knowledge that it encompasses, people have been saying that using that, they have been able to make more nuanced predictions. Again, explainability is like pretty much horrendous in everything DL, but at least empirically, they've been showing that it's been helping. Yeah.
Okay. Huh. That's interesting. Are you aware of how other people who are working on recommendation systems have concretely leveraged, for example, LLMs or some other things in their workflows?
Yeah, I think one of the papers that came up is so the main thing that it helps, like I mentioned, in candidate generation. The second most important thing is like in Rexis, there's a problem called cold start. So maybe just to describe cold start, it's usually like either you have a very new user to the space, so you can't really make a recommendation for them because you have no interaction history, or you have a new item. And again, because you don't have much interaction history, you can't make a recommendation for them. So LLMs typically what they do is based on like the initial. So within cold start, there are two different kinds of cold start. It's normal cold start and strict cold start. Strict cold start is where you have like nothing about the user. Normal cold start is like you have a bit of information. The user just got onto the website, they started hovering and clicking on a few things. So you have like a little bit of information to go on. So when you have that little bit of information to go on, LLMs seem to be able to discern preference of the user a bit better than what like a typical metrics factorization approach is being able to. So especially in cold start, it's been proving effective. And I think there have been a few companies. Alibaba has, I think it's parent called Taib. Actually, I don't want to mess up the name. Taibabo. I'm not sure what the company's name is, but yeah, they had like a paper where they said for cold start, they've been using it essentially.
That makes sense, right? Because all the data that you might have from the user, if the user's been long on the platform, you could collect from your own platform, right? But about the user, you do not know anything, then probably LLM with all its vast knowledge, it could probably take few aspects of who your user is and help us with the cold start problem than what we have as a platform, because we don't know this person at all. That makes total sense.
Yeah. Cold start is one area, and there is another paper, I forgot who published it. It's called Hierarchical LLMs. And essentially, instead of using any kind of like neural network, they just, so within recommender systems, there's this idea of sequential recommendations. Essentially, the input to the model is the sequence of items the user interacted with, and the output is going to be the next item the user will interact with. So that's essentially called sequential recommendation. So to create the embedding for the item, typically you use some kind of like a neural network. You could use in two-town neural networks, it's just a simple like feed-forward neural network, or you could use any kind of like neural network. So to create that item embedding, they're passing it through the LLM and getting an embedding. And they're saying that the LLM's world knowledge is making the embedding richer. So each time for each of the item embeddings, they're using the LLM. And then when they predict the next item, they are saying that it's a better prediction. But yeah, it's a 2024 paper. So I would say give it maybe a year for people to refute it. But so far it's looking interesting.
That's so cool.
I love this. This is the first time, I think, in our podcast, we're talking about LLMs in the regular, like day-to-day tech ML work.
Workflows,
so, Yes. This is pretty awesome.
Hey, Karun, I'm taking that as AI is not replacing us anytime soon.
No, definitely not.
Actually, what's your take on that?
I think it's gonna make a lot of our tasks easier, but I guess just because I've worked at so many companies, just because that nobody writes anything down, it's very hard for a model to know something that isn't written down. Like it sort of exists in everybody's head, and then a portion of it is passed on to a junior who stays there for a while and builds another portion and spark. So since nothing is written down, there's no way it can learn.
This is why we need a Neuralink. What is it? What is it called? The chip inside the brain?
Neuralink,
we probably need that. So make sure why Elon Musk is onto it.
So
that's why like family recipes can never be replicated by factory machines or anything like that, regardless of how fancy those things are. And like people are like restaurants or whatever still have a place hundreds and hundreds of years later.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just even if even like the best documentation I've seen, usually there's like 30% that's still missing. Just because nothing's never written down and that human factor is always there, there's also always a bit of nuance. I feel like that's hard to teach an LLM, at least at this moment. Oh yeah, definitely not in like the immediate future.
Oh man, that's I think for our viewers there to ensure job security, never write anything down. Only have
exactly
less documentation for job security.
Or make sure you you get to know what your other person's brain has, so that you get to keep it in your brain and not in a document.
Yeah, totally. Hey, that's been a really fun episode. Thank you so much, Karun. Sravya, sure. Before we end, anything else you want to cover?
I think we have this question that we are trying to ask almost every guest. Karun, what do you think is the most underrated skill when it comes to data science, applied science, this area?
Most underrated skill? I guess making connections. Like it's been the one that's been or helped me the most, primarily because like you don't know what you don't know. So it's like when you keep talking to different people, You get to know what kind of work they're doing. And more importantly, you get to know of a data set that you never knew existed. More often than not, most of the big impacts that I've been able to make on mature products didn't come from model improvements. It came because we injected a new data source. So just like having like one coffee chat at least every month with some team that's not within your immediate team, so that you know what you don't know and just get to know a different data set. It's going to be very helpful.
Love that. So
What a great
networking,
advice.
right?
Yeah, definitely.
And obviously, it makes sense to do it outside your company as well in the market to make it better for you. Just to
Definitely.
understand industry trends, just to make sure you have enough people to get the 20 referrals per month. Was that the metric? Going back to awesome networking. That's a great answer. Thank you, Karun.
For
Thank
sure.
you so
Yeah,
much.
it's nice being here.
Such a fun episode. For our viewers, if you like this video and found value, please like, subscribe, comment, and we'll bring you more content like this in the future.
Thank you, guys.